It was supposed to be a moment of unity, a tribute to Queen Elizabeth, dignified, historic, unquestioned. But just hours before a senior royal was set to travel, everything changed. The plans were stopped, not delayed, not reconsidered, blocked. And behind that decision, Prince William. No explanation, no warning, just silence. And suddenly, what should have been a tribute became something far more complicated. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What makes this moment so striking is not just the disruption itself, but the nature of the event it interrupted. This was not a casual gathering. It was a deeply symbolic occasion, one that carried emotional weight, historical significance, and an expectation of unity that few royal events can truly command. A tribute to Queen Elizabeth was never meant to be overshadowed. It was meant to bring the family together, to reinforce continuity, to project stability at a time when the monarchy continues to redefine itself. And yet, just as preparations reached their final stages, something shifted. Quietly, decisively, without explanation. The travel plans were halted in a way that left no room for interpretation. This was not a scheduling conflict, not a last-minute adjustment. It was a clear and deliberate stop. Those within palace circles felt it immediately, not as chaos, but as disruption. A break in expectation. Because decisions like this are rarely made without careful consideration, and even more rarely without explanation. Yet this one came with neither. Insiders, accustomed to the controlled rhythm of royal planning, were reportedly caught off guard. Conversations that should have focused on the event itself began to circle around a single question: why? And beneath that question, something else began to surface. A sense that this was not logistical, but intentional. That the decision carried meaning beyond the immediate action. Because when a senior royal is blocked from attending an event of this magnitude, it doesn't just affect attendance, it reshapes perception. It introduces tension into what should have been a unified moment. And it raises the possibility that something deeper is unfolding behind the scenes. The emotional undertone within royal circles reflected that uncertainty. Shock, not expressed openly, but felt. Confusion, not discussed publicly, but understood privately. Because while the public would only see the event itself, those within the system recognized that something had shifted. A boundary had been drawn. A decision had been made that carried implications far beyond a single journey. And at the center of it all stood Prince William. Not explaining. Not addressing. Simply acting. That silence, more than anything, amplified the moment. Because silence within the monarchy is never empty, it is controlled. Intentional. And often, more revealing than any statement could ever be. Early speculation began to form almost immediately, suggesting that this was not an isolated decision, but part of a broader dynamic. That internal tensions, long managed beneath the surface, may have reached a point where they could no longer remain hidden. The idea that this act was connected to those tensions began to take hold, quietly but persistently. Because moments like this do not emerge without context. They are shaped by history, by relationships, by unresolved conflicts that exist long before they become visible. And now, one of those moments had surfaced. Not loudly, not dramatically, but unmistakably. A decision that stopped more than a journey. It stopped an expectation. It interrupted a narrative. And it forced a question that could not be easily answered. But this wasn't just about stopping a journey, it was about who was being stopped. And why. They were expected to attend. Their presence almost guaranteed. A senior royal with history, influence, and a complicated relationship with the institution itself. But suddenly, they weren't going. And no one could explain why. Because this wasn't just about absence, it was about exclusion. The weight of that absence began to grow the moment it was noticed, because this was not a figure who simply faded into the background. Their connection to Queen Elizabeth was not symbolic, it was deeply personal, built over decades of shared moments, public duty, and private understanding that only those within the royal circle could truly grasp. Their presence at an event honoring her was not just expected, it felt necessary, almost inevitable. And yet, that inevitability was broken. quietly, but decisively, which is what made the situation so difficult to ignore. Because when someone so closely tied to the legacy being honored is suddenly removed from the moment, it changes the meaning of the moment itself. It introduces questions that go beyond logistics and into something far more complex. This was not a matter of choice. That distinction matters, because choosing not to attend carries its own narrative, one of personal decision, of distance, of agency. But being blocked removes that agency entirely. It reframes the situation. It suggests that the absence was not self-directed, but imposed. And that implication alone shifts the entire tone of what unfolded. Within the royal family, relationships are rarely simple. They are shaped by history, by expectation, by roles that often conflict with personal dynamics. And in this case, those layers appear to have played a significant role. There have long been suggestions of tension, subtle, rarely confirmed, but persistent enough to form part of the broader narrative surrounding this individual. Not open conflict, but distance. Not rejection, but complication. The kind of relationship that carries both respect and unresolved friction at the same time. And it is within that space that this decision begins to take on deeper meaning. Because it suggests that the past is not as settled as it appears. That old dynamics, long managed beneath the surface, may still influence decisions in ways that are not immediately visible. Speculation has naturally followed, with some pointing to previous controversies that may have shaped perceptions, even if they were never fully addressed. Others suggest that the concern was not about the past itself, but about how that past might resurface in a moment meant to be controlled, unified, and emotionally precise. Because events like this are not just about honoring legacy, they are about presenting it carefully, deliberately, and any element that risks disrupting that presentation becomes a concern. The emotional complexity of this situation cannot be overstated. This is not a simple story of inclusion or exclusion. It is a story of balance between respect and control, between acknowledgement and limitation. Because while the senior royals' connection to Queen Elizabeth may have been genuine, their presence also carried unpredictability, not necessarily in action, but in perception. And perception, within the monarchy, is everything. Which leads to a possibility that is difficult to ignore, that their absence was not just about removing a person, but about protecting a narrative. Ensuring that the event unfolded in a way that aligned with its intended meaning, without the risk of distraction, reinterpretation, or emotional complexity that could not be easily managed. And if that is the case, then this decision becomes something more than a personal one. It becomes strategic, intentional, a move designed not just to shape the present moment, but to control how that moment would be remembered. And as questions began to grow, one name kept surfacing at the center of the decision. Prince William has always been seen as the future, but what if the future is already in control? Because this wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a discussion. It was a decision. And the message behind it was unmistakable: authority is no longer waiting its turn. What makes this moment so powerful is not just what was done, but how it was done. There was no visible debate, no prolonged hesitation, no attempt to soften the impact. The decision arrived complete, final, controlled, and executed with a level of certainty that left little room for interpretation. And within the palace, that kind of decisiveness does not go unnoticed. Because influence in the monarchy has traditionally moved slowly, shaped by hierarchy, by experience, by an unspoken understanding that authority is something you grow into, not something you assert too early. But this felt different. This felt like a shift. For years, William's role had been defined publicly by preparation, by symbolism, by the expectation that he would one day lead. Yet behind the scenes, that role appears to have evolved into something far more active. Decisions that once would have required layers of consultation now seem to carry his direct imprint. Not always visible, not always acknowledged, but increasingly undeniable. The transition from future leader to present authority has not been announced, it has been demonstrated. And this decision, more than most, has made that demonstration impossible to ignore. Reports suggesting that the call came directly from William have only intensified that perception. Because if true, it means this was not a shared conclusion, it was a controlled one. A moment where leadership was not deferred, but exercised. And that carries weight. not just politically, but emotionally. Because authority, when asserted in this way, does not simply resolve a situation, it redefines relationships. It establishes boundaries. It signals that decisions will no longer be shaped by tradition alone, but by a new perspective, one that prioritizes direction over deference. At the heart of this lies a tension that has been building quietly for years, the balance between preserving legacy and enforcing control. William's position places him at the intersection of both. He is tasked with protecting what has been built, while also ensuring it can survive what lies ahead. And those two responsibilities do not always align. Protecting legacy often means maintaining continuity, honoring established dynamics, avoiding disruption. Enforcing control, however, requires something else entirely. It demands action. It demands decisions that may not be comfortable, but are necessary to shape the future. And in this case, it appears that control took precedence. The generational divide within the monarchy becomes more visible in moments like this. Not as open conflict, but as a difference in approach. Those who have operated within the system for decades understand its rhythms, its boundaries, its unwritten rules. William, however, represents something different, a willingness to challenge those rules, to adapt them, to redefine what leadership looks like in a modern context. And that kind of shift does not happen without tension. Because change, even when necessary, is rarely embraced by everyone at the same time. What makes this decision particularly significant is the sense that it was not reactive. It was not made in response to immediate pressure or unexpected circumstances. It was deliberate, calculated, a move that appears to have been considered long before it was executed. And that transforms its meaning entirely. Because reactive decisions can be explained. Strategic ones reveal intent. And in revealing that intent, they also reveal direction. The idea that this was a statement of power is difficult to dismiss, not in an overt sense, not as a display meant to be seen publicly, but as a message understood internally. That authority is shifting. That influence is consolidating. That the future is not waiting, it is already unfolding. And in moments like this, that realization carries both clarity and consequence. Because power, once exercised, changes expectations. It reshapes how decisions are interpreted, and it invites a response, whether spoken or unspoken, from those who are affected by it. But power like this doesn't emerge without resistance, and not everyone was willing to accept it quietly. Behind the public image of unity, something else was unfolding. Conversations turned strained, loyalties questioned. Because blocking one royal doesn't just affect one person, it sends a message to everyone. What appeared controlled on the outside began to ripple inward, quietly but unmistakably, creating a tension that could not be easily dismissed. Within the royal family, reactions did not come in loud declarations or open confrontations. They came in fragments, subtle shifts in tone, guarded conversations. Moments where silence carried more meaning than words ever could. Because in a system built on tradition and hierarchy, disagreement is rarely expressed directly. It is felt. And in this case, it was felt deeply. Some within the family understood the decision, even supported it. They saw it as necessary, a move that reinforced control, ensured stability, and protected the integrity of an event that carried enormous emotional weight. To them, the absence of one individual was a small price to pay for maintaining the larger narrative. But others viewed it differently. Quietly, privately, there was unease. Not necessarily about the outcome, but about the way it had been reached. Because decisions of this magnitude, especially those involving family, are expected to carry a degree of consultation, of understanding, of balance. And when that balance is disrupted, it creates discomfort that does not fade easily. The emotional strain began to settle into relationships that were already navigating complexity. Conversations that once flowed naturally now carried hesitation. Words were chosen more carefully, reactions measured more cautiously. Because every interaction now existed within a new context, one shaped by the knowledge that authority had been exercised in a way that could not be ignored. Trust in this environment becomes fragile. Not broken, but tested. And when trust is tested, it changes how people relate to one another, even if nothing is openly acknowledged. There were moments, small, almost imperceptible, that hinted at deeper tension. A discussion that ended without resolution. A response that felt just slightly restrained. The kind of subtle confrontations that never become visible, but leave a lasting impact. These were not dramatic conflicts. They were quieter, more controlled, but no less significant. Because within the monarchy, it is these quiet moments that often reveal the most. The response of the blocked royal, or rather the absence of a clear response, only added to the complexity. Silence once again became a central element. No public reaction. No visible pushback. Just a presence that had been expected, and then wasn't. And that silence created its own kind of tension. Because without a response, there is no closure. Only speculation. Only the lingering sense that something remains unresolved. That something is being held back, deliberately or otherwise. As these dynamics continued to unfold, a broader realization began to take shape. This was not just about one decision, it was about what that decision revealed. The underlying tensions that had existed long before this moment were now more visible, more tangible. The relationships, the histories, the unspoken complexities, they were no longer operating entirely beneath the surface. This moment had brought them closer to view, and in doing so, it shifted how everything else would be understood moving forward. Because once a boundary is crossed, it cannot be uncrossed. Once authority is asserted in this way, it changes expectations. It redefines what is possible. And for those within the system, that realization carries weight. The decision was no longer seen as isolated. It became something more, a breaking point. A moment that marked a shift, not just in action but in dynamic. And as that shift settled into place, the focus of the situation began to evolve. It was no longer just about what had happened. It was about what it meant. And what might come next. And while the family struggled to contain the fallout, the real question began to shift. What if this wasn't about control, but about prevention? Because as the story unfolds, a more unsettling possibility begins to emerge. That this decision wasn't about stopping someone from attending, but stopping something from happening. The more closely this moment is examined, the more it begins to feel less like an isolated decision, and more like a calculated safeguard. Because events honoring Queen Elizabeth are not just ceremonial, they are carefully structured, emotionally precise, and deeply symbolic. Every presence, every interaction, every moment carries weight. And within that kind of environment, unpredictability becomes a risk that cannot be easily managed. The presence of this particular royal, with their layered history and unresolved tensions, may not have guaranteed disruption, but it introduced the possibility of it. And in a setting where the narrative must remain controlled, even the smallest possibility can become significant. There are suggestions, quiet but persistent, that concern was not about what would happen publicly, but what might unfold in unscripted moments. Conversations that were not planned, interactions that could not be controlled, emotional responses that might reveal more than intended. Because within the royal family, history is never entirely settled. It lingers, beneath the surface, influencing dynamics in ways that are not always visible, but are always present. And in a moment meant to honor legacy, any deviation from that carefully constructed narrative could shift the focus entirely. That possibility alone may have been enough. The emotional stakes tied to Queen Elizabeth's legacy are immense. She represents continuity, stability, a unifying figure whose memory carries both reverence and expectation. Any event dedicated to her is not just about remembrance, it is about preservation. Of image, of meaning, of the story that surrounds her reign. And preserving that story requires control, not just over what is said, but over what is seen, what is felt, what is allowed to unfold naturally. Because once something unpredictable happens in a moment like this, it cannot be undone. It becomes part of the narrative, part of how the event is remembered. And if that narrative shifts in a way that introduces tension or conflict, it changes everything. This is where the idea of prevention becomes more compelling than control. Because control reacts, it manages what is already happening. Prevention acts earlier. It removes the possibility before it can become reality. And that is what this decision begins to resemble. Not a reaction to an immediate problem, but a preemptive move designed to ensure that no problem could arise in the first place. The distinction is subtle, but powerful, because it suggests foresight. It suggests awareness of dynamics that are not publicly acknowledged, but deeply understood within the institution itself. It also suggests that the decision was not made lightly, that it was weighed against the consequences, the perception, the emotional impact it would carry. And yet, it was still made, which reinforces the growing belief that whatever risk was being avoided was considered significant enough to justify the action. The idea that something unpredictable was being prevented introduces a layer of tension that extends beyond the immediate event, because it raises questions not just about what could have happened, but about what has happened in the past, about moments that may have unfolded differently than intended, about patterns that have been managed quietly, without ever becoming visible to the public. And if this decision was influenced by those patterns, then it suggests a deeper understanding of internal dynamics than anyone outside the palace could fully grasp. That realization shifts the entire perspective. This is no longer just about a blocked journey or a missed appearance. It becomes about the mechanisms of control that operate beneath the surface, shaping outcomes before they can become unpredictable. And in that context, the decision takes on a different meaning, not as an act of authority alone, but as an act of protection. Protection of narrative, of legacy, of an image that must remain intact, even when the realities behind it are far more complex. And if that's true, then the implications go far beyond one event. To the public, everything appeared seamless. The event continued. The tribute unfolded. But something was missing, and people noticed. Because when silence replaces explanation, it doesn't hide the story, it amplifies it. At first, the absence was subtle, almost easy to overlook. The ceremony maintained its dignity, the tone remained respectful, and the structure followed exactly what had been expected. But for those who follow the monarchy closely, for those who understand the weight of presence and absence in moments like this, the gap was impossible to ignore. Because this was not just any event, it was a tribute to Queen Elizabeth. A moment where every detail carries meaning. And when a senior royal, expected to attend, is suddenly not there, it creates a quiet disruption that lingers beneath the surface. The palace, however, said nothing. No clarification. No acknowledgement. Just a continuation of appearances, as if nothing had changed. And that silence, carefully maintained, began to take on its own significance. Because in an institution where communication is never accidental, the absence of explanation is often the most deliberate message of all. Media outlets quickly began to circle the story, piecing together fragments, analyzing timing, questioning inconsistencies. Not aggressively at first, but with a growing sense of curiosity that refused to settle. Because the official narrative, if it could even be called that, offered nothing. And when nothing is offered, everything becomes open to interpretation. Royal watchers, accustomed to reading between the lines, began to notice patterns that did not align. The sudden change in travel plans, the lack of acknowledgement, the way the event proceeded without any reference to the absence. These were not oversights. They were signals, subtle but unmistakable once seen. And with each passing moment, the disconnect between what was presented publicly and what was unfolding privately became more pronounced. Emotionally, that disconnect created tension. Not dramatic, not visible in any overt way, but present in the way people began to question what they were seeing. Because the monarchy relies on perception, on the ability to project stability, unity, and continuity. But when reality and perception begin to diverge, even slightly, it creates uncertainty. And uncertainty, in a system built on tradition, is difficult to contain. Silence, once again, revealed itself as a tool of control. By offering no explanation, the palace maintained authority over the narrative. It prevented confirmation. It limited speculation from becoming fact. But it also did something else. It invited deeper curiosity. Because when a question is left unanswered, it doesn't disappear. It grows. It evolves. It becomes more persistent with time. And in this case, that question was not just about what had happened, but about why it had happened. The idea that this was not a simple scheduling issue began to take hold. Because nothing about this felt simple. The timing, the lack of communication, the context of the event itself, it all pointed towards something more intentional. Something that had been decided, not adjusted. Something that carried meaning beyond logistics. And as more people began to sense that, the narrative started to shift. This was no longer just about an absence. It was about a decision. A decision that had been made quietly, but whose impact could not be hidden. And as the silence stretched on, one question became impossible to ignore. This wasn't just about one decision, it was about what that decision represents. Because when power is exercised this openly, it signals something deeper. A shift. A transformation. And perhaps, a warning. What we are witnessing is not a single moment of authority, but the emergence of a new leadership style, one that is more direct, more assertive, and far less reliant on the slow, consensus-driven traditions that once defined royal decision-making. Prince William's approach is beginning to take form not through speeches or declarations, but through actions that leave little room for ambiguity. And this action, more than most, has revealed that change is no longer theoretical, it is already happening. The balance between authority and unity, long maintained with careful precision, now appears to be under strain. Because leadership within the monarchy has always depended on a delicate equilibrium. Too much control risks division. Too much compromise risks stagnation. And navigating that balance requires not just strength, but restraint. Yet this decision suggests a willingness to lean more heavily toward authority, even when that authority carries emotional consequences. Because blocking a senior royal is not just a logistical act, it is a relational one. It sends a message that hierarchy is no longer simply respected, it is enforced. And enforcement, while effective, comes with a cost. The emotional impact of that cost is already beginning to surface. Not in dramatic confrontations, but in quieter, more subtle ways. Relationships within the family, already shaped by years of complexity, are now being tested under new conditions. Trust is no longer assumed, it is evaluated. Decisions are no longer expected to be shared, they are anticipated to be delivered. And that shift changes how individuals interact, how they respond, how they position themselves within the structure. Because when control becomes more visible, so too does the distance it can create. At a broader level, this moment signals that the monarchy may be entering a new phase, one defined not just by continuity, but by recalibration. The internal power structure is evolving, adapting to a leadership style that prioritizes clarity over ambiguity, decisiveness over tradition. And while that may strengthen the institution in some ways, it also introduces uncertainty in others. Because every shift in power reshapes expectations. It forces those within the system to adjust, to reconsider their roles, their influence, their place within a hierarchy that is no longer entirely predictable. Questions about how future decisions will be handled are already beginning to form. Will this level of authority become the standard? Will consultation give way to direction? Will tradition continue to guide action, or will it be redefined by a new generation of leadership? These are not questions that demand immediate answers, but they are questions that will shape the monarchy's future in ways that extend far beyond this single moment. Because turning points are rarely recognized in real time. They are understood later, when patterns begin to emerge, when decisions begin to align, when the direction becomes clear. And this decision carries all the markers of such a turning point. Not loud, not publicly declared, but unmistakable in its impact. It suggests that what lies ahead will not simply be a continuation of what has come before. It will be something different, something more controlled, more defined, and perhaps more challenging for those who must navigate it. The idea that more changes may follow no longer feels speculative, it feels inevitable. Because once a new approach is established, it rarely remains isolated. It expands. It influences future decisions. It becomes part of the system itself. And as that system evolves, so too does the meaning of moments like this. Because they are no longer just events, they are indicators, signals of what is coming next. But even with all these answers, one mystery still remains. Some moments pass quietly, others redefine everything. And this may have been one of them. Because blocking that journey didn't just change one event, it revealed something that can't be unseen. At first, it felt like a disruption, a sudden, unexplained decision that altered the course of a single occasion. But as time moved forward, the weight of that decision began to grow. Because its impact did not end. When the event concluded, it lingered, expanding into something far more significant than anyone initially realized. The absence of that senior royal, once a detail, became a symbol, not just of what didn't happen, but of what was prevented. And in that prevention, something deeper was exposed. The internal dynamics of the monarchy, usually hidden behind tradition and carefully managed appearances, had, for a brief moment, been revealed. Not fully, not clearly, but enough to shift perception. Because once a decision like this is seen, it cannot be unseen. It changes how every future moment is interpreted. The emotional fallout did not arrive all at once. It unfolded gradually, in the spaces between events, in the quiet interactions that followed. Because while the public moved on, the individuals within the system could not. They carried the implications forward, into conversations, into decisions, into relationships that now existed within a slightly altered framework. The blocked royal's absence, initially tied to a single event, began to take on a broader meaning. It was no longer just about where they weren't, it was about why they weren't allowed to be there. And that question lingered, unanswered but persistent, shaping how their role would be perceived moving forward. The monarchy itself began to reflect that shift, though not in ways that were immediately obvious. Public perception did not change dramatically, but subtly, quietly. The sense of continuity remained, but beneath it, there was a new awareness, a recognition that control within the institution was more active, more deliberate than it had appeared before. That decisions were not always the result of tradition, but of intention. And that intention, once revealed, carries its own kind of influence, because people begin to look differently. They begin to question not just what is happening, but what is being shaped behind the scenes. This moment, in its simplicity, revealed a larger truth. That small decisions within the monarchy are rarely small at all. They are reflections of deeper dynamics, of relationships, of power structures that operate beneath the surface. And when one of those decisions becomes visible, it acts as a window brief, but revealing. It allows a glimpse into how the system truly functions, beyond the ceremonies, beyond the statements, beyond the carefully constructed image. And that glimpse changes everything. Because once seen, it cannot be forgotten. The tension that emerged from this decision has not fully resolved. It remains present, not in open conflict, but in the quiet awareness that something has shifted, that boundaries have been redefined, that authority has been exercised in a way that sets a precedent. And precedents within the monarchy are powerful. They shape expectations. They influence behavior. They determine how future situations will be handled. The idea that this moment will shape future interactions no longer feels uncertain, it feels inevitable. Because once a line has been drawn, it does not disappear. It becomes part of the structure itself. And those within that structure must now navigate it, whether they acknowledge it or not. This was not just a moment of disruption. It was a moment of definition, a point where something changed, not dramatically, not visibly, but fundamentally. And those kinds of changes are the ones that matter most. Because in the end, this wasn't just about who didn't attend it, it was about who made sure they couldn't. Every legacy is protected. But the question is, how far is too far? Because in preserving one moment, something else may have been lost. Trust, unity, balance, and now, the monarchy faces a reality it can't ignore. What began as a single decision has now expanded into something far more enduring, because its impact does not end with the event, it continues, shaping relationships, perceptions, and the unspoken understanding of how power now operates within the royal family. The long-term implications are not dramatic or immediate, but they are undeniable. Subtle shifts in trust, slight changes in how decisions are interpreted, a growing awareness that authority, once balanced carefully with tradition, may now lean more heavily toward control. And that awareness changes everything. Because relationships within the monarchy are not just defined by titles, they are defined by trust, by shared understanding, by the belief that decisions are made with a collective sense of purpose. And when that belief is challenged, even quietly, it introduces distance. Not visible, not openly acknowledged, but present in a way that cannot be easily reversed. The emotional cost of maintaining authority in this way is something that rarely reaches the surface, but it exists nonetheless. Because enforcing control, especially within a family dynamic, requires difficult choices. It demands decisions that may protect the institution while placing strain on the individuals within it. And those strains, though subtle, accumulate over time. They shape how people interact, how they respond, how they position themselves within a structure that now feels slightly more rigid, slightly more defined. This moment, whether intended or not, has introduced a question that will not easily fade: where is the line between transparency and control? Because while the monarchy has always relied on managing perception, there is a growing expectation both internally and externally for greater openness. And when decisions like this are made without explanation, it reinforces the idea that control still takes precedence over clarity, that certain actions are not meant to be understood, only accepted, and that tension between what is shown and what is withheld becomes part of the broader narrative moving forward. For Prince William, this may well stand as a defining moment not because of the decision itself, but because of what it represents. A shift from potential to action, from future leadership to present authority. It marks a point where his approach to leadership becomes visible, not through words, but through consequences. And those consequences will shape how he is perceived, not just as a figure within the monarchy, but as someone who will one day define its direction entirely. The monarchy itself now finds itself navigating a delicate balance between preserving its legacy and adapting to a leadership style that is more assertive, more controlled, more willing to act decisively. That balance is not easily maintained. It requires constant adjustment, constant awareness of how each decision resonates beyond its immediate context. Because every action now carries a deeper meaning, a reflection of where the institution is heading. And in moments like this, that direction becomes clearer, even if it is not openly stated. What remains most powerful about this situation is not the decision alone, but the reflection it creates. On power, how it is used, how it is justified, and what it ultimately costs. Because power is never without consequence. It shapes outcomes, but it also reshapes relationships. It preserves structure, but it can alter trust. And in doing so, it leaves behind questions that cannot always be answered, only considered. Was it the right decision, or was it simply the necessary one? That distinction matters, because what is right and what is necessary are not always the same. And within the monarchy, that difference carries weight that extends far beyond a single moment. It becomes part of the legacy itself. Because sometimes the most powerful moves aren't the ones we see, but the ones that stop something from happening at all. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.